Hello again. I'm just going to give you an overview of what the Survival Skills Performance BENDS course actually is all about. Now, in its normal form, what it would be a 1 day training course out on the road. That is to say, you would get something delivered to you by email, a briefing about the conduct of the course. You get some fairly comprehensive course notes to use, first of all, to prepare yourself for the training, but also as crib notes to be used after the event. And then we would go ahead with the training. So again, short briefing before we start. Normally a short assessment ride whilst I look at your riding and figure out where you sit on the spectrum of riders and what needs to be dealt with. And then finally the structured training. So it would be something like about 5 hours of actual time out on the road, lunch break in the middle, and then at the end of the session you'd go home after a short verbal debrief, but I would follow that up a few days later with a fairly comprehensive, fairly long written debrief to give you a full reminder of, first of all, what we covered, but secondly also your areas of improvement, your areas to be improved, and finally a structured way of going ahead with your own improvement in your own time. So that would make up the structure of the course. Now, obviously, we're not going to be able to do the out on the road stuff, so we're going to have to try to find ways around that. But I want to give you an overview, first of all, about the training itself. Now, the most important thing that I really want to say is that even if you've taken advanced training elsewhere, and you may well have done if you're looking at this, I think the survival skills approach is significantly different, and I'll come on to that in a minute. The most important thing to remember is that whilst corners are great fun, if anybody rides a bike, there's a fair chance that the bit that they really get to enjoy is riding a bike around a corner. They're also the location of many serious crashes, and in fact, whilst we have this idea that most motorcyclists are killed in junction collisions, that's not actually the case. Most motorcyclists are actually killed out on the open road and often on corners, not exclusively on bends. There are fatal crashes at junctions, there are fatal crashes when overtaking, but a very significant number, most open road crashes, are one-to-one crashes where the motorcyclist simply falls off and unfortunately is either seriously injured or dies. So there is a real reason for approaching cornering and attempting to improve it. The classic cornering error is turning in too early and then running wide in the second half of the bend. And again, I'll be explaining lines and how to avoid making that error later on in the course. Why do we get ourselves into this pickle? The interesting thing is that it is independent of where we ride. If you go and look at the statistics, and I have done in fairly some depth, we have much the same crash anywhere in the world. People fall off in North America on corners, they fall off in Europe in corners, they fall off in Australia and New Zealand in corners, and it's all much the same crash, which tells me really, and it should tell everybody else, that it's a human error. It's nothing to do with training or attitude or the problems with other road users or road surfaces or anything else. It's simply humans make mistakes. For some reason or other, we tend to get corners wrong. So anyway, back to specific problems in the UK. One of the issues that we have is that the DVSA's standard syllabus for new riders basically ignores cornering. There's nothing in CBT that is worthwhile, and there's whether or not cornering is covered at the test level is really down to the instructor. At advanced level, things are slightly better, but it still tends to focus on what is in roadcraft. And motorcycle roadcraft, may be a great defensive riding manual, but what it isn't is a skills based manual. It talks very little about cornering skills. In fact, counter steering was something we'll be talking about, only got a mention in the very latest edition. So what survival skills will do is it will approach cornering by making sure that you understand the core braking, throttle and cornering control that we need to corner effectively. And then we'll work out how we can apply those skills actually out on the road. But more than that, we'll look at where things go wrong on the road. And one of the techniques that I will point out in some detail is how to use road signs effectively. In general, we don't get the best out of our road signs, but they're there to highlight hazardous corners as well as other hazards on the road. We'll look at positioning for view, but we'll also look at why we need to think about two different views. Not just what's around the corner, which is what we tend to think of when we're approaching a bend, the limit point, if you're familiar with that. I'll be looking at another issue, which is view into openings and side turnings, something which tends to get overlooked. We'll also look at how to minimize the risk from oncoming vehicles. When it comes to the corner itself, we need to use the right machine control in the right place to get round the bend effectively. So one of the techniques I'll introduce you to is what I call the system of reference points. You'll know you obviously have to use the change of speed and change of direction to get round a bend. It's fairly obvious. What this course will tell you is exactly how to do that, but more importantly, where to do that. And these are the reference points that we'll be discovering. They're based loosely on work that Keith Code did some years ago. If you've heard of him, he's worth looking up. If you haven't heard of him, again, I will be introducing his work. One of the things that I will really talk about defeating is what's known as target fixation. That's a problem that when we're in trouble for any reason, when we're frightened of something, when we feel that there's a threat of personal harm, we tend to look at it. Now, if we're going around a corner and there's a ruddy great truck coming the other way, it may well scare the life out of us. But looking at it is not a great idea when we're trying to get past it. So we'll talk about how to avoid target fixation. And finally, we'll show you how to use machine control techniques which differ from sort of smooth riding, which is generally seen as the target of advanced riding. We'll show you how to use really positive machine control, not just to get the bike round the corner when everything's going right, but more importantly, to make necessary corrections when things are going wrong. Because again, one of the real important points I want to get over to everybody on the course is that what we need to deal with is not the perfect corner. It's the worst case scenario. It's the worst possible corner that we've ever come across, because those are the ones that will catch us out if we're not ready to deal with them. So our emphasis on these courses is going to be to look at how to minimize risk where we can, but how to manage risk where we can't. And again, it's a fairly serious change of approach from conventional advanced motorcycling. What else do I want to talk about? The summary of the course will come together, the content will kind of coalesce, and it'll become what I call point and squirt cornering. Now, this is something that I've been using ever since my very first advanced cornering course that I ran back a long time ago, 1997 in fact, and the concept is still pretty unique to survival skills. So we'll see how to use the machine control and the reference points I've mentioned to pinpoint the place on the road itself where we need to put our machine control in. Okay, now structurally, how does the e-course work? Well, in many ways it mirrors the way that I would do it on the road. We will use a building block approach to our training. We'll introduce small pieces of information that will coalesce, build together block by block, level by level, and eventually they'll kind of top off like a pyramid does from a series of blocks. So what we avoid by doing that is leaving anything unsaid. Some of the early stuff, there's a good chance that you'll know, you may know it well, but what I want to avoid is somebody coming in to the course, and suddenly halfway through the course they say, actually, I don't know anything about this. How does this work? And the reason that they don't know is because I've missed out something on the lower levels of our building block approach because I've assumed everybody knows it. So we won't be making any assumptions. We'll probably romp through the first couple of weeks fairly quickly, but the important thing is that we stack skills one on top of the other rather than pick them out of the air. Having said that, because we're moving from area to area within our pyramid, there will be times that it's not quite clear where any particular exercise is going. But what usually happens is a few sections into our pyramid down the line, suddenly things will start to coalesce. So that'll all come together hopefully as the course proceeds, and then, as I say, we'll eventually come to the top of that pyramid, but in a logical manner, a progressive manner, with skills that build on top of each other. Final point, as I've said about my practical training, the skill proceeds at your speed, not mine. Now, when I'm doing the training on the road, the pace of delivery depends how the trainee is getting to grips with what I'm teaching over the course of that 5 hours. And sometimes I will extend the course a little, or may even recommend a second day. If that happens, well, so be it, that's fine. With the e-course, we can do the same sort of thing. You'll have a sort of each week will be a module, and I am anticipating that the course will run for 8 weeks through 8 successive stages, but there's no necessity for you to finish everything within a week, if you see what I mean. What I'm doing is putting a group of topics together, and ideally we can move through week at a time, so it'll take you 8 weeks, 2 months. But if you can't finish one for any reason, if you need any extra help, then we will have technology there for me to deliver added assistance to you to ask for it, me to give you it. So there's no actual timetable as such where you need to be at a particular place every single day or week. Anything else to say? Really not a lot. You'll jump in at the beginning and you'll work your way through to the end of the course. There's no prior knowledge that's needed. The course is going to be suitable for anybody really riding a motorcycle, whether you are a beginner or an expert. If you're an expert, you may think that you won't learn anything. Come along, sign up, and see what you think at the end of the 8 weeks. You'll undoubtedly, I think, learn something new. Okay, I think that's all I really want to say for the moment. I'll be back with another video soon to help you out with the Survival Skills Performance BENDS e-course. Thanks very much for your time, and talk to you soon.